Revolutions don't always come with banners and protests. Sometimes the only shots fired are snippets of code. This is one of those moments. AI is the most disruptive force in history, and it's no longer a distant possibility. It is here right now, and it's already changing the foundations of power and the economy. Few people have been as influential in shaping the direction of AI than mega investor Ben Horowitz. A pioneer in Silicon Valley, he spent decades at the center of every major technological disruption, including standing up to the Biden administration's attempts to limit and control AI. In today's episode, he lays out where AI is really taking us, the forces that will define the next decade, and how to position yourself before it's too late. You are in an area making investments, thinking about some of the things that I think are the most consequential in the world today as it relates to innovation. But along those lines, you and Mark Andreessen are all in on AI, but how do we make sure that it benefits everyone instead of making humans obsolete?
To begin with, we have to just realize, what AI is, because I think that because we called it artificial intelligence, our whole industry of technology has a naming problem in that we started, by calling computer science, which everybody thought, oh, that's just like computers. It's like the science of a machine, as opposed to information theory and what it really was. And then in Web3 world, which you're familiar with, we call it cryptocurrency, which to normal people means secret money. But that's not what it was.
That's a good point.
And then I think with artificial intelligence, I think that's also like a bad name in a lot of ways. And that, look, the people who work in the field call what they're building models. And I think that's a really accurate description in the sense that what we're doing is we're kind of modeling something we've always done, which is we're trying to model the world in a way that enables us to predict it. And then, we've built much more sophisticated models with this technology than we could. In the old days, we had E equals MC squared, which was like amazing, but a relatively simple model. Now we have models with like 600 billion variables and this kind of thing. And we can model like, what's the next word that I should say and that kind of thing. So that's amazing and powerful. But I would say like we need to distinguish the fact that it's a model that is directed by us to tell us things about the world and do things on our behalf, but it's not life. It doesn't have a free will and these kinds of things. So I think default, we are the master and it is the servant, as opposed to vice versa. The question though that you're getting at, which is, okay, how do we not get obsoleted? Like, why do we need us if we've got these things that can do all the jobs that we currently do? And I think, we've gone through that in the past, and it's been interesting, right? So in, I think, 1750, over 90% of the jobs in the country were agricultural. And, there was a huge fight and a group called the Luddites that fought the plow and, some of these newfangled inventions that eventually, by the way, eliminated 97% of the jobs that were there. But I think that most people would say, gee, the life I have now is better than the life that I would have had on the farm, where all I did was farm and nothing else in life. But, and if you want to farm still, you can. That is an option, but most people don't take that option. So the jobs that we have now will, a lot of them will go away and but we'll likely have new jobs. I mean, humans are pretty good at figuring out new things to do and new things to pursue and so forth. And, including like going to Mars and that kind of thing, which obviously isn't a thing today, but could very well be a thing tomorrow. So I think that, we have to stay creative and keep dreaming about like a better future and how to kind of improve things for people. But I think that, particularly for kind of the people in the world that are on the struggle bus who are living on $1 a day or, kind of subject to all kinds of diseases and so forth, life is going to get like radically better for them.
When I look at the plow example and the Luddites fighting against it, I think you'll see the same thing with AI. You're going to get people that just completely reject it, refuse to engage in anything for sure. But when I look at AI, what I worry about is that there will be no refuge to go to, meaning if you realize, oh, I can't plow as well as a plow or a tractor or now a combine, there's still a lot of other things that technology can't do better than me. Do you think there's an upper bound to artificial intelligence, bad name or not? Or do you think that it keeps going and it literally becomes better than us once it's embodied in robotics at everything?
We are kind of limited by the new ideas that we have. And artificial intelligence is really, by the way, artificial human intelligence, meaning, humans looked at the world, humans figured out what it was, described it, came up with these concepts like trees and, air and all this stuff that it's not necessarily real. It's just how we just decided to structure the world. And AI has learned our structure. Like they've learned language, human language, which is a version of the universe that is not an accurate version of the universe. It's just our version of the universe. So it's
But you're going to have to go deep on that. I know my audience is going to be like, air seems pretty real when you're underwater. What do you mean that trees and air are not necessarily real?
It's a construction that we made. We decided it is literally the way humans have interpreted the world in order for humans to navigate it. And, as is language, right? Language isn't the universe as it is. Like if completely objective, if you had an objective look at, the atoms and so forth and how they were arranged and whatnot, you probably, those descriptions are lacking in a lot of ways. They're not completely accurate. They certainly don't kind of predict everything about how the world works. And so what machines have learned, or like what artificial intelligence is an understanding of our knowledge, of the human knowledge. So it's taken in our knowledge of the universe, and then it is kind of can refine that, and it can work on that, and it can derive things from our knowledge, our axiom set. But it isn't actually observing the world at this point and figuring out new stuff. So, at the very least, humans still have to discover new principles of the universe or kind of interpret it in a different way, or the machines have to somehow observe directly the world, which they're not yet doing. And so that, that's a pretty big role, I would say. But then, in addition, we direct the world. I think like Star Trek is actually a pretty good metaphor for that. Like the Star Trek computer was pretty badass. But, the people in Star Trek were still like flying around the universe, discovering new things about it. There was still much to do. And I think that it's always a little kind of difficult to figure out what the new jobs that get created are. And we've had intelligence for a while, right? Like we've had machines that could do math way better than us. I can remember when I was in junior high school, our junior high put on a play about like how bad it was that there were calculators because nobody would know how to do arithmetic, and then all the calculators would break, and then we'd be stuck. We'd be trying to like fly around the universe in rockets, but we wouldn't be able to do math, and the calculators would be broken. We'd be screwed. So there is always that fear. And, we've had computers that can play games better than us. We currently have computers that can drive better than us and so forth. So we have a lot of intelligence out there, but it hasn't, created like this super dystopia, in any degree. It's actually made things better, everywhere it's appeared. So I would expect that to continue.
What do you think, though, is the limiting function? So when I look at AI, I always say, unless we run into an upper bound where the computation just can't allow the intelligence to keep progressing, it seems like it will become not only generalized human intelligence and thusly be able to do everything that we can do, it will become embodied as robotics. And if I ran the math on this once, Einstein is roughly 2.4 times smarter than someone who is definitionally a moron. And the gap just between those two is so dramatic. The Army won't even draft somebody that is a moron at, whatever, 81 IQ or whatever it is, because they create more problems than they solve even just by being, bullet fodder. So do you think there is something that's going to cause that upper bound, or you have a belief about the nature of intelligence that will keep AI subservient to us?
The smartest people don't rule the world. Einstein wasn't in charge. And, many of us are like ruled by our cats. And so like power and intelligence don't necessarily go together, particularly when the intelligence has no free will, or has no desire to free will. It doesn't have will. It is kind of a model that's computing things. I think also, the whole general intelligence thing is interesting in that, Waymo's got a super smart AI that can drive a car, but that AI that drives the car doesn't know English, and, isn't, particularly good at other tasks, currently. And then the ChatGPT can't drive a car. And so that's, how much things generalize particularly. And if you look at, well, why is that? A lot of it actually has to do with the long tail of human behavior, where humans, the distribution of human behavior is, it's fractal, it's Mantle-Browdian or whatever. It's not evenly distributed at all. And so, an AI that kind of captures all that turns out to be, we're not so much on the track. We're more on the track for kind of really great reasoning over kind of a set of axioms that we came up with, in say math or physics, but not so much, kind of general human intelligence, which is, being able to navigate other humans and the world in a way that is productive for us. Is kind of it's a little bit of a different dimension of things. You can compare the math capabilities or the Go playing capabilities or the driving capabilities or the IQ test capabilities of a computer. But that's not really a human. I think a human is kind of different in a fairly fundamental way. So what we end up doing, I think, is going to be different than what we're doing today, just like what we're doing today is very different than what we did 100 years ago. But the not having a need for us, I think that, these AIs are tools for us to basically navigate the world and help us solve problems and do things like, everything from prevent pandemics to deal with climate change to that sort of thing, to not kill each other driving cars, which we do a lot of. Hopefully it doesn't, create more wars. Hopefully it creates less wars, but we'll see.
What I know about the human brain may be tricking me into painting a vision of the future that isn't going to come true. Let me put words in your mouth and you tell me if they fit appropriately. What I hear you saying is something akin to the way that we're approaching artificial intelligence right now. Let's round it to large language models. That is going to hit an upper bound where it's not able to have insights that a human won't already have, that they are trapped inside of the box that we have created, what you're calling the axioms by which we navigate the world. They get trapped inside that box, and thusly will never be able to look at the world and go, I'm not going to predict the next frame. I'm going to render the next frame based on what I know about physics. And so water reacts this way in an earthbound gravity system. And so it's going to splash like this, and it understands liquid dynamics, et cetera, et cetera. So is that accurate? Are you saying that it is trapped inside of our box and will never have?
It hasn't demonstrated that capability yet. So like, it hasn't like walked up to a rock and said, this is a rock, right? We labeled it a rock because that's our structure. But, a rock isn't probably a more intelligent being would have called it something else, or maybe the rock is irrelevant, to how you actually can navigate the world safely. And kind of figuring those things out or kind of adopting to them is just not something that, it's trained on our rendition of the universe, in our kind of literally like the way we have described it using language that we invented. And so it is constrained a bit to that in nature currently. That doesn't mean it's not like a massively useful tool and can do things. And by the way, can derive new rules from the old rules that we've given it, for sure. But, I think it's a bit of a jump to go, it's going to replace us entirely when the whole discovery process is something that we do that it doesn't do yet.
Okay, the way that the human mind is architected is you have competing regions of the brain. Like if you cut the corpus callosum, the part that connects the left and the right hemisphere, you can get two distinct personalities, one that is atheist, for instance, and one that believes deeply in God, and they'll argue back and forth. I mean, this is in the same human brain. So that tells me that what you have is basically regions of the brain that get good at a thing, and then they end up coming together to collaborate, and that is sort of human intelligence. And I've heard you talk about there's something like 200 computers inside of a single car. So if we already know that you can daisy chain all of these, like it's a very deep knowledge about one thing, but as you daisy chain them, the intelligence gets what I'll call more generalized. You don't see that as a flywheel that is going to keep going.
What we can compute will get better and better and better. But having said that, that doesn't say that, like humans, humans built the machines, plugged them in, give them the batteries, all these kinds of things. And they've been created to fulfill our purposes. So, what it means to be a human will change, like it has been changing, and kind of how humans live their life will change. But humans still find things to do. I mean, like it's kind of like, like a cheetah's been able to run faster than a human forever, but we never watch cheetahs race. We only watch humans race each other. Computers have played chess better than humans for a long time, but nobody watches computers play chess anymore. They watch humans play humans, and chess is more popular than it's ever been. And so I think we have like a keen interest in each other and how that's going to work. And these will be kind of tools to enhance that whole experience for us. But I think it's, like a world of just machines seems like really unlikely.
So you've got people like Elon Musk, Sam Altman, who have both expressed deep concerns about how AI may in fact make us obsolete. Elon has likened, he's certainly become fatalistic, but he gave a rant that I absolutely love. That is, AI is a demon summoning circle, and you're calling forward this demon that you were just convinced you're going to be able to control. And he certainly is not so sure. And at one point, and again, I'm fully aware that he's on his fatalist arc and he's just moving forward and he's building it as fast as he can.
But like it's interesting that both of them, despite saying these things, are building AI as fast as like they're literally in a race with each other to see who can build it faster.
What do you take away from that?
Demon faster that they're warning about.
What do you take away from that? Is it just regulatory capture on both of their parts? Is it is Elon being sincere? Not that I need you to mind read him, but like, what do you take away in the fact that they've both warned against it and they're both deploying it as fast as they can?
It seems fairly contradictory. Look, I think there's, like, I won't question either of their sincerity at some degree, but I do think there are many reasons to warn about it. But like, I also think that, any kind of new super powerful technology in a way, they're right to kind of warn about like, okay, this thing, if we, if we don't think about some of the implications of it, could get dangerous. And I think that's a good thing. Like every technology we've ever had, from fire to, from fire to automobiles to nuclear to AI, has got the internet has got downsides to it. They all have downsides, and the more powerful, the more kind of intriguing the downside. And maybe like without the internet, we probably would have never gotten to AI. So maybe that was the downside of the internet, that it led to AI or something like that, you could argue. But I think generally we would take every technology we've invented and keep it, because, net, they've been positive for humanity and for the world. And that's generally, and that's why I think they're building it so fast, because I think they know that.
All right. So anybody with a 17-year-old right now is thinking, oh my, where do I point my kid? What do I tell them to go study that's future-proof? What can we learn about the way you guys are investing at Andreessen Horowitz that would give somebody an inclination of what you think a 17-year-old should be focused on now?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think one of the things, what we're saying in the kind of smartest young people that come out is they spend a lot of time with AI learning everything they possibly can. So I think you want to get very good at like high curiosity and then learning. You have available to you all of human knowledge in something that will talk to you. And that's an incredible opportunity. And I think that anything you want to do in the world to make the world better, you now have the tools as an individual to do that in a way that, if you look at kind of what Thomas Edison had to do in creating GE and like what that took and so forth, it was a way higher bar to have an impact. Whereas now I think, you can very quickly, build something or do something that, just pick a problem. It's not like, sometimes in this AI conversation, the thing that we ignore is like, well, what are the problems that we have in the world? Well, we still have cancer and diabetes and sickle cell and every disease, and we still have the threat of pandemics, and we still have climate change, and we still have, lots of people who are starving to death, and we still have malaria, and so like pick a problem you want to solve, and now, you have a huge helping hand in doing that nobody in the history of the planet has ever had before us. So I think there's really great opportunities along those lines. So that would be my, my best advice, I think, is to get really good with that. And look, I think a lot of the things that we've learned or that have been valuable skills traditionally are going to change. So you really, again, want to be able to learn how to do anything. And I think that's probably going to be key.
We'll get back to the show in a moment, but first, let's talk about protecting your wealth in these very uncertain times. And the truth is, market volatility can wipe out your retirement account overnight. It's not speculation, it's happened countless times throughout history. This is why so many financial experts recommend diversifying with a scarce, sound physical asset created by exploding stars, gold. It has withstood the test of time through every economic collapse in history. For those looking to add gold and silver to their portfolio, American Alternative Assets offers a reliable solution. They provide concierge, white glove customer service for Impact Theory viewers. Now, no one can guarantee anything, but do not wait until after the market crashes to protect what you've built. Go to tomgetsgold.com or call 1-888-615-8047 today to get started. Again, that's tomgetsgold.com or call 1-888-615-8047. This is a paid advertisement. And now let's get back to the show. When I look at the things you were just talking about, that feels right for people that have the inclination, that have the cognitive horsepower to go and say, okay, I'm going to leverage AI to extend my capabilities to tackle the biggest problems in the world. Certainly right now in this moment, that is the thrilling reality that people should focus on. But then I contrast that with the deaths of despair among largely young men. We have this problem in, call it middle America, where manufacturing jobs have gone away. So for that normal, just sort of everyday person, I want to have a trade, I want to go out into the world and get something done. Is AI going to be useful to them, or are they going to get replaced by robotics?
The truth of it is there's only one robot supply chain in the world, and that's in China. And, so like we all need a robot supply chain. We need to manufacture that. So I think there's going to be like a real manufacturing opportunity coming up and it'll be a different kind of manufacturing. Certainly more will be automated and so forth, but there will be a lot of things to learn in that field that I think will be, super interesting and likely very, very good jobs. So ironically, I would say like going into manufacturing now as a young man and trying to, kind of figure out what that is and get engaged in it will probably lead to quite a good career, maybe in creating factories have become like insanely valuable and kind of national and strategic to the national interest as well.
That makes sense. So again, at the level of the guy smart enough to build the facility, yes. And I recently saw a video of the grocery store of the future where it is a huge grid inside of a giant facility. And there's just like these bots that look kind of like small shopping carts, and they're just grid patterning across all the items, snatching up whatever you order. So you order online, these things grab all that stuff, and then they send it off to you. So for the person that's savvy enough to build that facility, yes, tremendous. But what I think I hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that, okay, there are two opportunities here. The opportunity one is if you're the kind of person that can leverage AI to build that facility, massive opportunity. If you're the kind of person that would traditionally work at that factory, something new is coming. We know that because looking back at history, all these technologies unleash things that we can't yet see. And so I have faith in we can't yet see it, but it is coming.
Yeah, no, for sure. Look, I mean, you know what, like the biggest in-demand job in the world is right now? Data labelers. And look, data labeling wasn't a job not long ago. But if you talk
I haven't even heard of this. What is data labeling?
Yeah, it's what Scale AI does. They pay armies and armies and armies of people to label data. So say, hey, this is a plant, or this is, a fig or whatever it is, for the AI to then understand it. And then, now with the, with the kind of reinforcement learning coming back into play, labeling, that kind of supervised learning is still like very, very, very important. And I think that, right now, like he's got unlimited hiring demand, which is, ironic for Scale AI to have unlimited need for humans. And I think, in manufacturing, there are going to be jobs like that, and there will be the kind of physical, when you go into these like the software companies that are doing robotics, they have people managing the robots, right? Like they're training the robots. Humans train robots to do all kinds of things. And it turns out that like folding clothes doesn't necessarily generalize to making eggs. They're like super different for robots. And so you need, these robots trained in all these kinds of fields and so forth. So I think there's a whole new class of jobs that are a little bit hard to anticipate, in advance. But I think at least for the next 10 years, I think the number of new jobs related to making these machines smarter is going to increase a lot. And then after that, I think there just tend to be like throughout history so many needs for new things that we never anticipated. Like, well, I mean, one of my favorite examples is, okay, computers are going to kill the typesetting business. And they did. Everybody knew that. Like, that was coming. Nobody said, oh, and then there's going to be 5 million graphic design jobs that come out of the PC. Like, nobody, not a person predicted that. So it's really easy to figure out which jobs are going to go away. It's much more difficult to kind of figure out which jobs are going to come. But like, if you look at the history of automation, which is kind of automated away everything we did 100 years ago, there's less unemployment now than there was then. And so you go, okay. And then, like, some of the employment will be much more, I think, enjoyable than the old employment as well, as it has been, over time. And you always talk about manufacturing jobs going away, but the manufacturing jobs that have gone away have been the most mind-numbing. So I think, things evolve in very, very unpredictable ways. And, like, I think the hope is that, the world just gets much better. But I'm not so worried about kind of anticipating all the horror that's going to come in. I mean, I think the main reason we're making these things is, the ways that they're making life better. And just like we finally figured out a way for everybody, like we already have in our hands, everybody can get a great education. Like, that whole inequality of access to education is like literally gone right now, which is pretty amazing. I mean, it's certainly
huge.
Yeah, nothing that I ever thought I'd see. So hopefully things go well.
The great irony, it's so crazy. I don't think anybody saw that coming. It was always going to be, it's going to go for the drivers. It's going to go for all those hard, difficult, repetitive tasks. Yeah, it's been very fascinating to see what actually is in danger, like super creative jobs, very much in danger. But yeah, as you get down, I mean, look, I think I believe way more strongly than you do that robots are just going to get better and better and better and better. But that could be that I'm not as close to the problem as you are. Speaking of which, the insights that you've had into AI, how are they informing the investments that you guys make?
The theory is there's this one like super intelligent big brain that's going to do everything. The reality on the ground is, even with the state-of-the-art models, they're all kind of good at slightly different things, right? Like, Anthropic is like really good at code. And Grok is really good at like real-time data because they've got the Twitter stuff. And then, OpenAI has gotten like very, very good at reasoning. So with all of them are doing AGI, but then they're all good at different stuff, which is, from an investing standpoint, it's very good to know that. Because if something like that's not winner take all, that becomes like super interesting. It also is interesting for what it means at the application layer, because if the infrastructure products aren't winner take all, and then the other thing about the infrastructure products that's interesting is that they're not particularly sticky in the way that kind of Microsoft Windows was very sticky, right? It was sticky. Right. You build an application on Windows, it doesn't run on other stuff. You've got to do a lot of work to move it to something else. So you get this network effect with developers. Then you go, okay, well, how does that work with state-of-the-art models? Well, people build applications on these things, but guess what? Like, to move your application to DeepSeek, you didn't have to change the line of code. They just literally took the OpenAI Python API and like it runs on DeepSeek now. Ta-da! So, that kind of thing really impacts, how you think about investing and like what is the value of having a lead in application, and then, where is the moat going to come from? And of course, AI is also getting, like, the one thing it is getting amazingly good at is writing code. And so then, how much of a lead do you have in the code itself versus, kind of the other traditional things? When I started in the industry, the salespeople were in charge. They were kind of like the big, there's a great TV show called *Halt and Catch Fire*. And if you watch it,
so good.
Like, the thing that's really stunning, if you're, kind of coming from the 2010s, 2020s world is, why are the salespeople so powerful? But they were the most powerful in those days. And it was because, distribution was the most difficult thing. And I think distribution is going to get very, very important again, because maintaining a technological lead is a lot harder, when the machine is writing the code and writing it very fast. Although it's not, it's not all the way where it can, build like super complex systems, but there's, a bunch of things out now. Replit got a great product for it. There's a company called Lovable that's got one out of Sweden that just builds you an app. Like if you need an app for something, just say, hey, build me this app, and there it is.
Yeah, another thing in Cursor that you can select what model you want to use for whatever thing that you're about to generate. So the ability to go, oh, I want 10 of these things. I'm going to use this one for this kind of code, this one for that kind of code. It's really fascinating. Now, the Biden administration was super hostile towards tech. When you look at what's going on now with the changes in regulatory, what do you think about the race between us and China? Were we headed down a dark path where if that administration had stayed with that, like we're going to have one or two companies, we're going to control them, that's going to be that? Is it possible we could have lost that race? Is that race a figment of my imagination? Is that real?
I think that there's kind of multiple layers to the AI race with China. And then, the Biden administration was kind of hostile in many ways, but all for kind of a central reason, I think. So, in AI in particular, when we met, and I should be very specific. So we did meet with Jake Sullivan, but he was very good about it. We met with Gina Raimondo. She was very good about it. But we met with the kind of White House, and their position was super kind of, I would say, ill-informed. So they basically they walked in with this idea that like we've got a 3-year lead on China, and we have to protect that lead, and there's no, and therefore we need to shut down open source, and that doesn't matter to you guys and startups because startups can't participate in AI anyway because they don't have enough money. And the only companies that are going to do AI are going to be kind of, ironically, the two startups, Anthropic and OpenAI, that are out, and then the big companies, Google and so forth, and Microsoft. And so we can put a huge regulatory barrier on them because they have the money and the people to deal with it. And then that'll be, and in their minds, I think they actually believe that that would be how we would win. But of course, in retrospect, that makes no sense. And it kind of, it damages, if you look at China and what China's great at, then this goes to the next thing. So there's how good is your AI, and then how well is it integrated into your military and the way the government works and so forth. And I think that China, being a top-down society, their strength is, that whatever AI they have, they're going to integrate into, it's already, all the companies are highly integrated into the government. So they're going to be able to deploy that, and we're going to see it in action with their military very fast. I think that the advantage of the U.S. is like we're not a top-down society. We're like a wild, messy society, but it means that all of our smart people can participate in the field. And look, there's more to AI than just the big models. As you said, like, how important is Cursor? It's really important if you're building stuff. So like, oh, you want to go build, the next whatever thing that the CIA needs or the NSA needs or this and that. Like you're building that with Cursor, you're using a state-of-the-art model. But like if you had eliminated, if the Biden White House had gotten their way, they'd eliminate things like Cursor. They'd eliminate startups being able to do anything in AI. And so the advantages that we have, that we don't just have a model, we've got all this other stuff that goes with it. And we've got, and then we have new ideas on models, with new algorithms and this and that. And that's what the US is great at. And I think, what China is great at is, by the way, they're very good at math. They have a lot of people are good at math, and AI is math. So their models are good. They also have a data advantage on us, where they have access to the Chinese internet. They have access to copywritten material, which they do not have the same deference for it that we do in the US. And so they're able to kind of get to, if you use DeepSeek, you go, wow, DeepSeek really is a great writer compared to a lot of the US models. Why is that? Well, they train on a bigger data set than we do. And that's amazing. So it really, I think what we want is we want to have kind of world-class, first-class AI in the US. And I think of it less as, is it ahead of China? Is it slightly ahead of China? I think that model, what we've seen with our own state-of-the-art models is the leads are very shallow. And I think that'll continue as long as we're able and allowed to build AI. And then economically, what you'd like, to have a vibrant AI ecosystem coming out of the US. So other countries, who aren't state-of-the-art with this stuff, adopt our technology, and we continue to be strong economically, as opposed to everything goes to China. And that was a big risk with the Biden administration, I think. And which was, what they were doing on AI was, tough. I would say what they were doing on kind of fintech and crypto was even tougher, in that they were just trying to get rid of the industry in its entirety. With AI, they were trying to, I would say they were extremely arrogant in what they thought their ability was to predict the future. Mark and I were in there, our job is to predict it. Like, this is our job, to invest in the future, to predict the future. And they were saying things that were so arrogant that we would never even think to say them, even if we thought them, because we know that we don't know the future like that. It's just unknowable. There's too many moving parts. I mean, these things are really complicated.
Mm. All right. Well, speaking of the future, fully accepting that it is very opaque and very difficult to see, what would you say is the most controversial view that you hold about the future?
If we don't get to world class in crypto, we're going to be, AI really has the potential to wreck society. And what I mean by that is, if you think about what is obviously clearly going to happen in an AI world, is one, we're not going to be able to tell the difference between a human and a robot. Two, we're not going to know what's real or fake. Three, the level of security attacks on big central data repositories is going to get so good that everybody's data is going to be out there, and there is no safe haven for a consumer. And then finally, for these agents and these bots to actually be useful, they actually need to be able to use money and pay for stuff and get paid for stuff. And if you think about all those problems, those are problems that are by far best solved by kind of blockchain technology. So one, we absolutely need a public key infrastructure such that every citizen has their own wallet with their own data, with their own information. And if you need to get credit or prove you're a citizen or whatever, you can do that with the zero knowledge proof. You don't have to hand over your social security numbers, your bank account information, and all this kind of thing, because the AI will get it. So you really need your own keys and your own data, and there can't be these gigantic, massive honeypots of information that people can go after. I think that with deep fakes, if you think about, okay, we're going to have to be able to whitelist things. We're going to have to be able to say what's real. But who keeps track of what's true then? Is it the government?
Oh, please, Jesus,
everybody
no.
trusts Trump now. Everybody trusted Biden. Is it going to be Google? We trust those guys, or is it going to be the game theoretic mathematical properties of the blockchain that can hold that? And so I think that it's essential that we regenerate our kind of blockchain crypto development in the US, and we get very serious about it. And, like if the government were to do something, I think it should be to start to require these information distribution networks, these social networks, to have a way to, verifiably prove you're human, prove where a piece of data came from and so forth. And I think that, we have to, have banks start accepting zero knowledge proofs and that be just the way the world works. We need a network architecture that is up to the challenge of, these super intelligent agents that are running around.
We were talking before we started rolling that you guys have an office in DC, and part of what you do is advise on that. Like what does the infrastructure changes? What do they need to look like? What are a small handful of things that you guys are really pushing to see the government adopt to modernize the way that the whole bureaucracy works?
Yeah, so there's a few things, and one of the things is because, blockchain technology involves money. We do need, it's not like we don't need any regulation. We do need regulation. And there are kind of very specific things that we're working with the administration to make sure are done in a way that kind of creates a great environment for everybody.
What are you guys hoping will get blocked out, for instance? Is that what you're about to cover?
Yeah, I mean, so like one of the first thing you need is, we do need electronic money, in the form of stablecoin, so actual currency. But we need that to not, like, it's very bad if one of those collapses, because then like the whole trust in the system breaks down and so forth. Well, why do we need this kind of money, this kind of internet native money? I'll give you an example. So we have a company called Daylight Energy, and what they do is, so we're going to run into a big energy problem with AI that I think most people probably listening to this know about, where AI consumes a massive amount of energy, much more than Bitcoin ever did, by the way, which everybody was all up in arms about. And, so much so that like you can't really even get it out of the power grid. And I think Trump has been smart about this, saying, hey, you probably need to build a kind of power next to your data center, because we can't be giving it to you from the central thing. But beyond that, I think that, kind of individuals, now have Tesla kind of solar panels and power walls and these kinds of things. And when you have one of those, you sometimes have more energy than you need and sometimes have less. And wouldn't it be great if you could, if there was a nice system that figured out who needed energy and who had energy, and you could just trade, and there was some kind of contract that said, okay, this is what you pay during peak, this is what you pay at different periods. And that contract probably best done in the form of a smart contract, but a Powerwall is not a human, so it doesn't have a credit card, it can't get a credit card, it doesn't have a bank account, doesn't have a social security number, but it can trade crypto, it can trade stable coins. And so we need that kind of currency to kind of facilitate all these kind of automated agreements and automated transfer of kind of wealth between entities in order to kind of solve these big problems that we have, like energy. And so we need a stablecoin bill that kind of says, okay, look, we need these currencies to be backed one for one with US dollars or whatever it is, so that, we can have a system that works and is trusted. Now, there's this really interesting side benefit to that, which is if you look at treasury auctions lately, the demand for dollars is not good. And a lot of that is, the two biggest kind of lenders to the U.S. have been China and Japan, and China's backed off a lot, and Japan has backed off somewhat, and so the demand for dollars has gone down. We've done things to also dampen demand, like when we sanctioned Russia and we seized the assets of the Russian central bank. There were other countries that had other entities that had money there, and their money got frozen and they couldn't access it, and so that makes people more wary of holding everything in dollars. So we've done a lot to dampen that, which of course has fueled inflation in the same way that increasing supply fuels inflation, killing demand fuels inflation. So here we would have this new major source of demand for dollars. And then the dollars would be much more useful because you can use them online as well. And machines can use them and so forth. So we really
And
need,
sorry, really fast for people that are trying to track that, the reason that would increase the demand for dollars is that the stablecoin would be backed 1-for-1 with
Yes.
debt. Is that the idea?
Well, yeah, with where you would basically you would have to have a dollar, right? For every,
You would hold treasuries.
Stablecoin, yeah. You basically hold treasuries so that if somebody wanted to redeem their stablecoins, they could. And then that way, it kind of the equivalent of the gold standard in the old days, when dollars were trying to get credible, we would need like dollars to be the gold standard for the stablecoin. And probably we should never back off of that. Maybe we should never back off of gold, but it's easier
good luck
when
with
it's
that.
dollars, because we did kind of start to run out of gold a bit. So that's, one thing. Then secondly, there's a bill that went through the House known as the Market Structure Bill. It was technically called FIT 21. That's a very important, whether it's exactly that or some form of that, because, when you talk about tokens, which are this kind of instrument that's very, very important in blockchain world, because it's the way that this amazing kind of network of computers gets paid for. So, who pays the people for running the computers? Well, that's paid in the form of these tokens. But these tokens, which can be created on blockchain, they can be many things. So you can create a token that's a collectible. You can create a token that is a digital property right, that links to, some piece of real estate or a piece of art or so forth. A token can be a Pokemon card. A token could be a coupon. A token could be a security that represents a stock. It could be, a dollar. So which one is it? Is a very kind of important set of rules that doesn't exist. And this is one of the most insidious thing that the Biden administration did, was basically say, well, everything is a security, everything's a stock, or, like something with asymmetric information, which kind of basically undermines the whole power of the technology. And so it was basically a scheme for them to kind of get rid of the industry. But it was very, very dark, cynical way of legislating things, and then they would make these fake claims about scams and so forth. But the market structure bill is very, very important in that way. And by the way, also another thing that was in the original market structure bill, which is important, is look, there are also scams. There are and we call it the casino, but like I can create some coin like the Haktua girl did, right? Like, and she creates a coin. She kind of lies about, her holdings and says she's going to hold them, but then sells them, after people buy it in a short time period and so forth. And there's no, part of the problem is there's no kind of rules around that. But in the kind of bill that passed the House, it said, like, you can create a token, but if you hold it, you can't trade it for 4 years. That kind of takes a lot of the ability to scam out of it, and kind of forces people to do things that are their real utilities, or if it's a collectible, if it is the Haktua collectible, it's got to be a real collectible where you don't just, rug the users of it right away. And so that's
right away.
Kind of, yeah,
it's okay to do it later, but
like in 4 years, it is what it is, right?
No, I'm just giving you a hard time. I just know how that's going to sound to people.
Yeah, no, thank you. But so these kinds of things I think are going to be really important to making the whole industry work. And so we're working, on that, trying to make it safe for everybody. But as I said, it's just such a critical technology in an AI world, where if we don't have it, Yeah, it's just going to be like a very kind of problematic, it's going to be, it's cyberpunk. It's it's a not a, it's a high technology, difficult society.
We'll get back to the show in a moment, but first, let's talk about a reality many business owners are facing. You understand the power of social media, but you're not posting consistently because the editing process can take precious hours out of your day. Nobody wants to spend hours cutting up videos when they could be running their business. The solution is to turn the things you're already doing into social media content automatically. That's why I'm excited about Opus Clip. Their Clip Anything AI tool is changing everything. All you have to do is upload any long-form video, and Clip Anything automatically finds the best moments and turns them into social-ready clips. Our social team at Impact Theory has been using it to streamline content creation, but this isn't just for media companies. It's for any business owner who needs to maintain a social presence without sacrificing hours to video editing. Here's your chance to try it. Go to opus.pro/clipanything and give it a try for free right now. That's opus.pro/clipanything. And now let's get back to the show.
Yeah. It was shocking to me, the level of backlash that the blockchain Web3 community got. What do you think drives that? Is it just the perception that it was only scams and there's nothing real? Like, what was that all about?
So there was multiple factors. So the first one is the one that hits all new technology where, oh, it's a toy. It doesn't do anything new. Like the old way of doing things is better. And, we saw that with social networking. We actually saw that with the internet. I mean, I think Paul Krugman famously said, never have more economic impact than a fax machine and so forth. So that's just kind of a normal thing that happens with new technologies as they start out looking not that important. And with crypto in particular, one way to think about crypto blockchain is it's a new kind of computer. And if you think about new kinds of computers, they're always kind of worse in every way, but maybe one, than the old computer. And so, if you look at even like the iPhone, it was a bad phone. It had a horrible keyboard. If you compared it to anything, it wasn't very powerful. It had a little itty bitty screen, but it had a feature that was pretty awesome, which you could put in your pocket. And it had like a GPS in it and a camera in it. And so now you could build Instagram, you could build Uber, which you could not build with the PC, and you still can't build with the PC. And so that was, enough. And then eventually, it started to add the other features, and it's an awfully powerful computer these days. If you look at blockchain, it's slower, it's more complicated to program. There's a lot of issues with it, but it's got a new feature, which is trust. It can make promises. You can trust, when that code, says there's only 21 million Bitcoin, you can absolutely count on that in a way that you can't trust Google. You can't trust, Facebook to say oh, these are our privacy rules. You can't trust that at all. You can't trust the US government to say they're not going to print any more money. That's for sure. Oof. And so, here's a computer that can make promises that you can absolutely count on. And you don't have to trust a company. You don't have to trust a country. You don't have to trust a lawyer. You just have to trust the game theoretic mathematical properties of the blockchain. And that's amazing. So now you can, program property rights and money and law and all these kinds of things that you could never do before. And so I think that's hard for normal people to understand. Who aren't deep in the technology. And so they get confused and they say, it's nothing, blah, blah, blah. And then, I think the next wave was you had, it was a very odd thing with the Biden administration because he wasn't really, I think it's come out now, he wasn't really the president. He wasn't really making any decisions. You couldn't even get a meeting with him if you were in his cabinet. And in terms of domestic policy, that was run by Elizabeth Warren. And then the second confusing thing is Elizabeth Warren is always calling people fascist. her whole push with fintech and crypto was to make sure that she could kick people out of the banking system who are political enemies. And so in order to do that, you have to outlaw new forms of financial technology, because those would be kind of back doors or side doors or parallels to the GSIBs and the banking system, which she comprehensively, and I think this is coming out now, could kick people out of. And so when you use, when it's a full top-down hierarchy and you can use private companies to enforce your will, that is the way fascism works. And then the way she does it is she sells this fake story about, it's funding terror. And it turns out like the USAID was funding the terrorist groups, but that's a different story. But, it's doing all these nefarious things, which, was just a very unfair portrayal. And so then the whole industry got this reputation as scammy and this and that and the other. And then, of course, we had Sam Bankman-Fried, who didn't do us any favors by, and this is another kind of, though, issue with what Elizabeth Warren did, is she blocked all legislation. And so the criminals were running free, and the people doing things that should have been legal were getting terrorized by the government. When they should have been looking at FTX, they were looking at Coinbase, which was totally compliant, public company,
begging for feedback, tell us what you want us to do,
et cetera. Exactly.
Yeah. That whole thing was crazy. Yeah. So given that AI is putting us on a collision course with, I don't know who's real, I don't know what's fake, do you think that blockchain is about to have its day like in the next 12 to 24 months? Or is this still something that it's so embedded deep in the infrastructure, it's going to take a long time to really have its I told you so moment?
Yeah, no, I think it's within 24 months for sure. I mean, I think that there's enough, there were if you look at kind of the last wave of blockchain, there were real technological limitations that made it, I think we're slowing it down from getting broader adoption. So, very obvious usability challenges. The fees were really high. The blockchains were slow. So there were just a lot of use cases that you just couldn't do on them. I think that's changing very, very fast. Things are, the chains are much faster. The layer 2 stuff makes them, very fast and cheap. People are doing a lot on usability, for wallets and these kinds of things. So I think we're getting pretty close. And then I think the needs are very high. So if you think of something like WorldCoin, to me, the difference between that thing being very broadly adopted and where it is now, where it's, I think half the people in Buenos Aires use it daily. So like it's very widely adopted where it's been legal. I think that, if they are able to get integrated into some of the big social platforms, then, like everybody needs proof of human. Like it would make the experience online so much better if you knew who was human and who was not. And right now, like you can't tell at all. And so, and that problem is going to get worse. And then the solution is really here. So I think it's going to start to take off. And you only need one or two big use cases to start getting the whole infrastructure deployed. And once the infrastructure is deployed, I think we'll certainly rely on it. And if you look at actually the curve of people who have active wallets and the curve of like internet adoption, they're pretty similar. It's about, I think blockchain's growing a little faster than the internet did initially. And so I think, we'll get to a place where it's certainly everybody in the US will be on it, which, by the way, could be great from a government standpoint. Elon has talked about putting, all the government payments on the blockchain, which I think would be really, really good for transparency.
Oh my God.
We'd never get into this weird situation now where like half the country wants to tear down all the government services and half of them wants to keep it because nobody knows what the hell the spending is. But that would be great. But, beyond that, like if you think about, why is there so much waste and fraud? Well, part of it is, I get taxed. I give my money to the IRS. The IRS gives it to Congress. They, do whatever they do with it and so forth. And well, how does it get to the people who need it? That's a very lossy process, and we don't even know who they are. And it's very, one of the things we found out during COVID, the government's not very good at sending people money. It's good at taking money. It's not good at sending them money, right? We lost like $400 billion trying to give people stimulus
ridiculous.
checks. Yeah, crazy.
Ridiculous.
But, like if everybody in the US had an address on the blockchain, you could just tell me, okay, here's 10,000 people who need money. Please send them, $5,000 each. Well, probably that's too much money for me, but, something like that. Whatever my tax bill is or whatever that portion of wealth redistribution is, that would be 100% zero loss. By the way, I'd feel a lot better about it because I know I'd be helping people. And, look, maybe even somebody would go, hey, this is great, thank you. And maybe it would bring us, we wouldn't have this crazy class warfare because everybody would know, hey, we're all integrated, like I'm helping you, you're helping me. And then if you had that, then you'd fix the whole kind of democracy integrity problem because everybody could vote off that address. And by the way, everybody would have an address because everybody would want the money. So what bigger incentive to register to vote than in order to get money, you have to have an address which registers you to vote. And so that kind of thing, I think, could get us to just a much higher trust in our own institutions.
Yeah. So, wow. Speaking of that, I wanted to absolutely scream into the abyss when I heard that people couldn't retire from the government faster than the elevator would lower their records down into a mine. I was like, what is happening? What do you take away from why does Elon want to do this? Why is he sleeping in hallways? Why? Why is he doing this? Is it just to get government contracts and it's nefarious in the way that so many people think it is? Or is there something positive there? What's the game?
I think there's a couple of different things. So one is the strong thing is he truly believes that America's the best country in the world. He is an immigrant, and that it's not guaranteed to stay that way. And we have been in danger of losing it. And so the most important thing for him to do in order for his companies to be relevant, in order for going to Mars to be relevant, in order for anything he wants to do in life to be relevant is we've got to stabilize the US government. I think that's the main thing driving him, So then you say, well, how did he get to that conclusion that, the whole country is in jeopardy? And it really it was a pretty interesting thing to watch because right in 2021, I think he was a Democrat and he was certainly pretty apolitical. And I was actually in a chat group with him when he got the idea or posed the question, should he buy Twitter? And a lot of it stemmed from, it started with the US government just harassing him, which was a very odd thing, right? I think you could very well argue he was our most productive citizen. He was our entire space program. He advanced the state of electric cars by 20 years. He's still 95% of something like that, percent of the electric cars sold in the US.
Jesus.
He's, done the things with Neuralink to, help people use their arms and legs who have been paralyzed and this kind of thing. So, you've got, he's a really kind of remarkable person to want to pick on, but what happened was because he got this PR for being very wealthy, the Biden administration targeted him. And again, they're fascists. So it's really a power struggle always with the fascists and anybody who looks like they're becoming powerful. And some of the things they did, and one of the ones that's talked about a lot was they sued him. The Biden Department of Justice sued him for discriminating against refugees. But he had a contract with the U.S. Department of Defense that required him to only hire U.S. citizens. So he was
So
breaking the
stupid.
law either way, and they never dropped the lawsuit. Even after it was pointed out, even after it was pointed out by Congress. So it was clear harassment, and I think that his conclusion from that was, this we are like ironically, I think his conclusion was we're losing the democracy. We're going into this very, very strange world where the incentives are all upside down. And, the way Elon thinks is it's up to him to save it. And so he got like extremely involved. And then I think the more involved he got, the more he both realized like a lot of the things really were dangerous. And then secondly, that he personally would be somebody who would know how to fix it. And you go like, well, why the hell would Elon Musk know how to fix the government, all this? And, this is the thing that everybody's saying now. And it's funny because I told this to Andreessen years ago, was because I'm a big fan of Isaac Newton. And, like we always talked about like, who is Elon like, like what entrepreneur comes to mind, and it really wasn't, like maybe Thomas Edison, but not really. But Isaac Newton was really the one that I always thought he was most like, because it's like, okay, who can build like rockets and cars and this and that and the other. But the reason I thought he was like Isaac Newton was at the end of Isaac Newton's life, when I think he was in his late 60s, maybe like 67, 68. And this is, for those of you who don't know, Isaac Newton, like he figured out how the entire world works and wrote it down in a book. Called Principia Mathematica, which is probably the most amazing work in the history of science. And he did it like entirely by himself. Like he didn't even talk to anybody at this, at the time he wrote it. I think he was trying to figure out what God was or something like that. But
as you do.
But so he gets to be, like in his late 60s, and the Bank of England has a crisis, which is causing a huge crisis for the whole country. Which is there's a giant counterfeiting problem. So the currency is going to be undermined and England's going to basically go bankrupt. And so they had no idea what to do about it. So they call Isaac Newton because he's the smartest man in the world. Of course, you're going to call him. So Isaac Newton, 67-year-old, like hermit physicist, goes in and he says, okay, I can help with the problem. Make me CEO of the Mint. So they make him CEO of the Mint, kind of head of DOGE, whatever. And he reorganizes the Mint in like a week and then fixes the technology in a month and completely makes it impossible to counterfeit. Then he becomes a private eye and goes into all the pubs where the counterfeiters are, arrests all of them. Then he learns the law and becomes the prosecutor and prosecutes all the counterfeiters and has a 100% conviction record. And that, by the way, that's Elon. So if you, and this is
I didn't know that part of his story.
Oh yeah. So it's an amazing thing. And if you look at Elon and Doge, like to me, the most remarkable thing about Doge is how he's done it. So if you or I were to say, okay, let's go in and kind of get the waste and fraud out of the government, what do we do? We would like audit the departments or this and that and the other and so forth. No. Like, that's not how he thinks. He's like, well, the first thing, like, how do the checks go out? Like, how is the system designed? Like, when does the money leave the building? And then, it all comes out of one system. Let me have access to that system and I'll look at all the payments. I'm not asking anybody what they're spending. I'm looking at what they're spending. Like, I'm getting to ground truth and then I'm going to work my way backwards from there. And he's probably, so not only is he not unqualified, he's maybe the only person qualified to figure out like how we're spending $7 trillion. And so, he's just a very unique individual. He's also a troll. He also likes upsetting people. I get all that. But what he brings to the table is pretty interesting, I would say. like very
Yeah, I would say
interesting.
very extraordinary. You have also written about another extraordinary historical figure from the Haitian Revolution, a guy named Toussaint.
Toussaint Louverture, yeah, yes.
Yeah. Tell us about him, because there's something about this moment, about being a master strategist, about using what you have, being creative, that feels like it's very apropos to this moment.
Yeah,
What made his story special?
Yeah, so Toussaint was another one of these characters in history. Like there are certain, I call them like once in every 400 year type people, where you just don't see them that often. But so it turns out, like in the history of humanity, there's been one kind of successful slave revolt that like ended in an independent state, which, if you think about the history of slavery, which goes back thousands of years, really kind of from the beginning of written history, like we've had slavery. So it's like a pretty old time construct. And, there's a lot of motivation to have a revolt if you're a slave. But why only one successful one? And it turns out it's really hard, to generate an effective revolt if you're slaves, because slave culture is difficult because you don't own, right? If you don't have any sense of, owning anything, you don't own your own will, right? Like you are at the kind of pleasure of who's ever running things. So long-term thinking doesn't make sense. And because like, why plan for next week? It doesn't matter what you plan, like it's not yours. So everything's going to be very short-term, and short-termism is difficult in a military context because in order to have an effective military, there needs to be a trust, right? Like a trust, you have to be able to trust people to execute the order. Like I give an order, it's kind of like the Byzantine generals problem, to go back to crypto, where like I have to trust that you're going to do the order, or you have to trust that I'm giving the correct order. But trust is a long-term idea because it comes from, okay, I'm going to do something for you today because I trust that down the line you'll do something for me. That doesn't really exist in slave culture because there is no long-term. So there is no tomorrow. And so like, how do you go from that to like running a successful revolution? And then if you look at Haiti at the time, you had the French army, the British army, and the Spanish army all in there kind of fighting for it. So like really well developed, kind of the strongest militaries of the era, all in that region, all very interested in the sugar, which was quite valuable at the time. So like, how in the world would you ever get out of that? And it turned out, he was probably the great cultural genius of the last, maybe in history, but certainly the last, several hundred years. And he was able, because he was a person who, although he was born a slave, was very, very integrated into European culture because he was so smart. And so the person who ran the plantation kind of took him to all the diplomatic meetings around and so forth. And he got very involved and kind of mastered, European culture, so to speak, and the different subtleties around it. And he started adopting those things and applying them to his leadership. And then, furthermore, incorporated Europeans into the slave army. So he would capture, he would defeat the Spanish, capture some guys rather than kill them. He'd incorporate, the best leaders into his army. And he built this very like advanced hybrid fighting system where they used a lot of the guerrilla techniques that he had brought over from Africa. And then he had, combined that with, some of the kind of more regimented kind of disciplined strategies of the Europeans. And in building all that, he ended up building this massive army and, defeated Napoleon and everyone else. And it was like just quite a remarkable story about how he just kind of figured everything out from first principles. And in a way, yeah, that was, kind of very much like Elon in that sense.
Yeah, one of
But
the
in a
things I
different
heard you talk
context,
about,
yeah.
yeah, wildly. But one of the things I heard you talk about that I thought was so ingenious was he
Yeah.
would basically use song
Yeah.
and sound as like
Communication.
encrypted
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah. Yeah.
brilliant.
So that was like a very cool thing. So, right. Remember that this is in the days before telephony or the internet or any of these things. It's pre Alexander Graham Bell and all that kind of thing. And so, they were literally, the Europeans were on like, notes, carrier pigeons, guys running, back and forth and so forth. And so as a result, you kind of needed the army together in one place just so you could communicate the order. Toussaint basically, had these drummers and these songs, which he could put on top of like the hill, who could be very, very loud. And then he would separate his army, into like 6 or 7 groups. But in the song would be embedded the order of when to attack and, when to retreat and all these kinds of things. So he had this like super advanced, wide area communication system that nobody else had. And that, that was a big advantage for him.
Yeah, that to me, the reason that comes up for me now is we have all these new technologies that are coming online, and the person that's going to be able to get outside that box and see something new and fresh is going to be able to use this in totally different ways. And while in the final analysis, I think you and I see it very differently in terms of AI's ability to ultimately gobble up what humans can do. But right now, AI is this incredible tool that as an entrepreneur, for me, it has been ridiculously exciting to, one, see how much farther each of my employees can push their own abilities by using AI. And then it does not take much to prognosticate out, 12, 18 months to understand where the tools are going to be and how much more they're going to let you do. Because we're largely an entertainment company. So for us to look at that and just the revolutionary changes, but you can't be trapped inside the old way of thinking. You've got to, like you said, build up from first principles.
Yeah, it's a new creative canvas. I think that's a really great way of thinking about it, in that it's like, well, is your creativity going to be used on, kind of frame by frame editing of like a video, or will it be thinking of like incredible new things you can do in a video ad that you could never do before, and have the AI do that for you, and so it's a little bit of a readjustment of where you put your creative energy into and the things that are possible and so forth. And I think that's, we're really seeing that across the board. Like in our firm, we're applying a lot of AI, and you'd be like, oh, well, is this going to mean, like you don't have human investors anymore? And it's actually been like totally the opposite. Like instead of this like painstakingly collecting, all the data needed to put the investment memo together, like the AI just does that for you. And then you're just thinking about like, okay, what are the really compelling things about this? Or rather than, trying to track every entrepreneur and like great engineer in our database, the AI is just tracking all those people and letting you know, hey, that guy just updated his LinkedIn profile, or that guy just put out like an interesting tweet. Maybe you should call him, and that kind of thing, which is just a much more kind of fun part of the game. And so, look, I would say the best predictor of kind of how things are going to go, or more like what's happening now, than like the most dystopian view of it that we can possibly think of, which I think is where a lot of people go to. And like I said, I think some of that's the name, artificial intelligence. It just sounds, we hate everything artificial. So why do we name it artificial?
That's too true.
Yeah.
Ben, I've enjoyed every minute of this. Where can people keep up with you?
Yeah, well, I am B Horowitz on X, and that's probably the best thing. We're a16z.com, and hope you enjoyed it. And it was great fun. Good fun catching up.
It was indeed. And then you also have multiple books that people can read that are extraordinarily well respected in the field. So also thank you for those.
Absolutely. Okay.
Awesome.
Thanks so
All
much,
right.
Tom.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate it. All right, everybody,
Yes,
if you have not already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Peace. If you like this conversation, check out this episode to learn more.
I think the AI censorship wars are going to be 1,000 times more intense and 1,000 times more important.
My guest today is someone who doesn't just keep up with innovation, he creates it. The incredible Mark Andreessen. Trust me, when someone like Mark, who spent his entire career betting on the future,